Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, An Unexpected Invitation. The afternoon sun hung low over Bombay, casting long, golden fingers across the veranda of the Grand Oriental Hotel. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the humid Indian heat, sat upright in a wicker chair, his silver-grey suit perfectly pressed, his patent leather shoes gleaming like mirrors. Before him lay a small silver tray, upon which rested a teapot, a single cup, and a letter sealed in dark green wax. He stirred his tea with deliberate care, then turned the envelope between his fingers. He murmured to himself. From Madurai. And the handwriting, neat, disciplined, yet there is hesitation in the loops of the letters. The hand of a man troubled in mind. With precise motion, he broke the seal and unfolded the heavy parchment. My dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to you with both respect and desperation. A most perplexing matter has arisen at my estate, one that touches upon the honor of my family and the sacred heritage of this land. The object in question, a temple bell of immense cultural and spiritual value, has vanished from within my home under circumstances I cannot explain. I beg you to come to Madurai and lend your unique powers of investigation to resolve this dreadful mystery before scandal destroys us all. Yours sincerely, Sir Reginald Haversham, KCIE. Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers beneath his chin. A missing temple bell, he mused softly. A man of English birth, living in Madurai, and a theft committed without explanation. It has, I think, the aroma of intrigue, and perhaps of the human passions concealed beneath honorable facades. He smiled faintly. ABN. The little grey cells demand exercise. By the following evening, Poirot had secured a compartment aboard the southbound express. His valet, an eager young porter, fussed over the detective's valise. Poirot waved him off with amusement. Careful, mon ami, the essence of travel is order. And order, as always, begins with symmetry. As the train pulled from the station, Bombay's bustle faded into the distance, replaced by palm-fringed plains, emerald paddy fields, and flashes of red earth. Poirot watched the landscape with curiosity. A land of mystery and beauty, he murmured. And yet, beneath its calm, turmoil, always turmoil. It is not unlike the human soul. He reached Madurai just after dawn. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and spice, the distant clang of temple bells echoing like a heartbeat through the ancient city. From the carriage window, Poirot glimpsed the towering gopurams of the Meenakshi temple, their painted deities glowing in the early light. At the station, a liveried servant awaited him with a placard reading Sir Reginald Haversham, guest. Poirot inclined his head graciously. You are from Haversham Manor, yes? Indeed, Sahib, the man replied, bowing slightly. Sir Reginald is most honored. The car waits. The drive through Madurai was a journey through contrasts. Narrow lanes filled with vendors and holy cows gave way to quiet roads lined with tamarind trees. At last they arrived at the Haversham estate, a sprawling colonial bungalow standing upon a rise overlooking the Vaigai River. Sir Reginald himself awaited Poirot at the entrance, a tall, silver-haired man with sharp blue eyes and the bearing of a soldier. Monsieur Poirot, he said warmly, it is a privilege to have you here. You must forgive the informality of our welcome, matters have been rather unsettled. Poirot bowed slightly. I am at your service, Sir Reginald. The situation you describe intrigues me greatly. You spoke of a temple bell, stolen, yet under impossible circumstances. Indeed. Come inside, you shall see for yourself. The drawing room of Haversham Manor was a gallery of colonial taste, teakwood furniture, silk drapes, portraits of the Raj, and, most strikingly, an empty glass case standing in the center of the library alcove. Sir Reginald gestured to it grimly. There it stood, Poirot, the bronze bell of Meenakshi, presented to my great-grandfather by the Maharaja himself in 1894. 3 feet high, carved with sacred symbols, said to bring divine protection to any home that guarded it. And now, gone, without a trace. Poirot approached the case, his keen eye sweeping over it. He noticed at once a thin crescent of disturbed dust along the edge of the pedestal, and a faint smear of sandalwood paste upon the latch. Curious, he murmured. Someone who handles holy objects, or wishes to appear as such. None of the servants were near the room, said Sir Reginald. The doors were locked after the dinner party, and in the morning, it was gone. No broken glass, no footprints, no clue at all. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, mon cher, there is always a clue. It merely awaits the eye that sees, not merely looks. He was then introduced to the rest of the household. Lady Eleanor Haversham, Sir Reginald's much younger wife, graceful but pale, her fingers constantly twisting a silk handkerchief. Simon Haversham, their son, a restless young man with the air of an adventurer and the faint scent of tobacco clinging to his sleeves. Colonel Arthur Forbes, an old friend of the family, loud-voiced and red-faced, his laughter masking a keen curiosity. Miss Priya Davy, the family's secretary, an intelligent woman of calm demeanor, her dark eyes observant and unreadable. Dinner that evening was a strained affair. Conversation faltered, glances were exchanged like secret notes. Poirot, ever polite, discussed the weather, the train schedule, and the beauty of Madurai, yet his eyes missed nothing. At one point, Lady Eleanor dropped her fork with a faint clatter. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I thought I heard a bell." Colonel Forbes chuckled uneasily. "Still haunting us, eh? You'll have me believing in curses next." Sir Reginald frowned. "That is enough, Arthur. We are all tired." Later that night, as Poirot prepared for bed, he stood by the window overlooking the garden. In the distance, beyond the banyan trees, he could hear the soft tolling of temple bells from the city, slow, rhythmic, ancient. Yet beneath that sacred sound, he caught something else, a faint echo, closer, metallic, from within the grounds themselves. He smiled to himself. "So, the bell is not silent after all," he murmured. "And neither, I think, are the hearts of those who have lost it." With that, Hercule Poirot extinguished his lamp, his mind already whirring with quiet precision. "The game," he whispered into the dark, "has begun." Chapter 2: The Vanished Bell. The morning broke bright and still, the sunlight spreading like molten gold over the tiled roofs of Haversham Manor. From his window, Hercule Poirot observed the slow stirring of the household, servants moving with quiet haste, a gardener sweeping the veranda, and a pair of peacocks strutting proudly across the lawn. All seemed tranquil, yet Poirot, whose instincts never slept, sensed a curious unease beneath the calm. Over breakfast, Sir Reginald appeared haggard and preoccupied. His cravat was carelessly tied, his manner brusque. "I trust you slept well, Monsieur Poirot?" "Excellently, thank you," Poirot replied. "The air here, it is heavy but most soothing." However, he tapped his spoon lightly on his saucer. "It is not the air that troubles you this morning, n'est-ce pas?" Sir Reginald sighed deeply. "You are perceptive as ever. It is this infernal mystery. I cannot rest until I know who took that bell. It is not only a matter of property, you see. It was a symbol, a token of trust between our family and the temple. If word of this theft reaches the Maharaja, my reputation in Madurai will be ruined." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Then we must recover not merely the bell, but your honor, Sir Reginald. I shall begin at once." The scene of the crime. In the cool shade of the library, Poirot examined the empty glass case again. It stood upon a teak pedestal in an alcove facing the garden windows. Sir Reginald and his son had hosted a dinner party here a week ago. The bell had vanished sometime after midnight. Poirot crouched delicately beside the pedestal, his eyes sharp as a jeweller's. "Observe, mon ami," he murmured to Sir Reginald. "There is dust, yes, but disturbed in an uneven crescent shape, as if someone leaned forward and lifted the bell with care, not haste. The absence of fingerprints suggests a cloth was used. And here." He touched the latch of the case, then held his finger beneath his nose. A faint trace of sandalwood paste. The same scent one finds in temples. Curious, is it not? Sir Reginald frowned. None of the servants would dare enter this room unbidden. "Perhaps," said Poirot quietly, "it was not one of the servants. Perhaps it was someone who wished us to believe it was." He straightened, his eyes moving to the tall French windows that opened onto the veranda. They were locked." "Indeed," said Sir Reginald. "My butler swears to it. And the keys have not left my study." Poirot raised his brows. A locked room, a vanished object, and no trace of entry. "Very well, we shall call it the problem of the invisible thief. But you see, Sir Reginald, even the invisible leaves footprints upon the mind." The interviews begin. Poirot requested that the household assemble in the drawing room. He preferred, as he always said, to observe people not only by what they said, but how they behaved in one another's presence. Lady Eleanor entered first, pale but composed, her soft blue gown accentuating her delicate frame. She avoided her husband's eyes and kept twisting her handkerchief, a gesture Poirot noted with interest. "Lady Haversham," he began kindly, "when last did you see the bell?" "The night of the dinner," she replied, her voice low. "After the guests left, I passed through the library. The moonlight fell upon the bell, it gleamed beautifully. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked. And after that, I went to bed. But sometime in the night, I woke. I thought I heard a faint humming sound, like metal vibrating. I convinced myself it was imagination." Poirot nodded slowly. "A sound that is half dream, half memory, such things often hide truth within illusion." Next came Simon Havisham, tall and restless, his shirt open at the collar. He regarded Poirot with polite indifference. "This whole business is absurd," he said. "It's probably some servant trying to make a quick profit." "Ah, but no servant has fled," Poirot pointed out. "And there are easier things to steal than a £200 temple bell, mon ami. Tell me, where were you that night?" "I was outside, in the garden. Needed some air." "Alone?" Simon hesitated. "Yes, at least, I think so." Poirot's moustache twitched. "You think so? But the truth, it is either OUI or none, not perhaps. Still, we continue. The final interview was with Miss Priya Davy, the secretary. She entered with quiet poise, carrying a notebook and pencil. "Monsieur Poirot," she said evenly, "I have prepared a record of the bell's history if it may assist you." "Excellent. Tell me, mademoiselle, you were responsible for cataloguing the artifacts, were you not?" "Yes, I recorded every item in Sir Reginald's collection." "Then you would have handled the bell recently." Her expression did not falter. 3 days before it disappeared. "I was cleaning the glass case." "And you used sandalwood paste to polish it, perhaps?" She looked momentarily startled. "Yes, it prevents tarnish." "How did you?" Poirot smiled. "The nose, mademoiselle, it never lies. But tell me, what do you think of the bell's legend?" Priya's gaze grew distant. "It is said the bell must never leave its temple. If it does, it will bring discord to those who keep it." Poirot inclined his head. "A most poetic curse." You believe in such things? I believe, she said softly, that objects can remember what people forget. Red herrings and reflections. Later that day, Poirot walked the garden path with Colonel Forbes, whose booming voice echoed across the lawns. Dash it all, Poirot, the Colonel declared, this isn't the work of any ghost or curse. Probably a native thief who knows the value of bronze. Poirot smiled politely. Perhaps. And yet, my dear Colonel, the thief left no trace of exit, no marks of struggle, and took nothing else of value. You must admit, it is not the work of an ordinary burglar. Forbes frowned. Well, if you ask me, that secretary of theirs knows more than she lets on. Clever girl, too clever by half. Poirot merely nodded. Ah, you think with suspicion, mon Colonel. But one must think also with order. When the threads are tangled, we first look not at their color, but at how they cross. They returned to the house just as the sun began to sink behind the banyan trees. The golden light turned red, and from afar came the soft tolling of temple bells, deep, haunting, and rhythmic. Poirot paused, listening intently. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "The bells, they speak, do they not? They tell of worship, of warning, and of guilt." So Reginald approached, anxious. "You discovered something?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not yet. But I begin to see that this is not a theft of greed, but of purpose. Someone wished to send a message, so Reginald, a message cloaked in sanctity." He turned toward the fading sky, where the crimson glow bathed the temple spires in fire. "And when a man dresses his crime in holiness," he said softly, "the sin is always deeper than it seems." Chapter 3, Shadows in the Temple. The following morning dawned with a heat so thick it seemed to shimmer in the air. From the veranda, Hercule Poirot gazed across the river, where the city of Madurai stirred to life in a slow, rhythmic hum. The cry of street vendors mingled with the clatter of bullock carts, and above it all, from some distant quarter, came the deep, measured ringing of temple bells, ancient, deliberate, almost hypnotic. He turned to his host, who stood beside him with a troubled expression. "So Reginald," Poirot said, "I should like today to visit the temple of Minoxie itself. If this bell that vanished from your home once belonged there, then perhaps its story, and those who revere it, can tell us something." So Reginald hesitated. "The priests can be sensitive, Monsieur Poirot. They believe the bell's removal a century ago was sacrilege." Poirot inclined his head. "Then we shall tread with delicacy, the same manner in which one handles the truth." The road to the temple. By mid-morning, Poirot and Miss Priya Davy were on their way, seated in an open carriage that wound through Madurai's narrow lanes. Poirot sat upright as always, a small parasol balanced above his head, his expression both curious and analytical. The city fascinated him, garlands of marigolds hanging from archways, the smell of jasmine and incense, women carrying brass pots balanced upon their heads, and everywhere, the shimmer of heat on stone. Priya, poised beside him, spoke softly, explaining the customs, the festivals, the legends of the temple's goddess. "The bell you seek, Monsieur Poirot," she said, "was once rung at dawn and dusk in the Minoxie shrine. It marked the moment when justice was served in the court of the king. It was believed that whoever heard its sound must speak only the truth thereafter." Poirot's brows lifted slightly. "A beautiful idea. But one that could be most inconvenient for those who live by deception, eh?" Priya smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is why the bell has been silent so long." Within the sacred walls, the Minoxie temple rose before them like a living jewel, towers painted in vivid blues and reds, covered with thousands of carved deities that seemed to breathe under the sun. The air was cool inside, thick with the scent of camphor and sandalwood. Chanting drifted through the long-pillared corridors, and lamps flickered like tiny golden eyes. Poirot removed his hat respectfully. "Magnifique," he murmured. One feels that even the stones here remember. Priya guided him through a maze of shrines and courtyards until they reached a quiet inner hall. There, an elderly temple priest awaited them, a small, thin man with wise eyes and a beard as white as ash. He bowed deeply. "You are the detective," he said in careful English. "The man who finds truth in silence." Poirot inclined his head. "Sometimes, my friend, truth shouts, but people pretend not to hear." The priest gave a faint smile. "You seek the lost bell, yes? The one taken long ago." "I seek understanding," Poirot replied gently. "If one understands the heart of the past, one may find the hand that acts in the present." The priest led them to a small alcove where a space stood empty between two carved elephants. "Here the bell hung," he said quietly. "When the British took it, the goddess ceased to smile. Some say her anger sleeps still, and that those who kept it would never know peace." Priya looked uneasy. Poirot studied her face for a moment before turning back to the priest. "Do you know of anyone who has spoken recently of returning the bell?" The priest's eyes flickered. "A few days ago, a young Englishman came here, proud, but frightened. He asked about the bell's worth, its power. I told him that to measure sacredness in gold is to invite misfortune." "A young Englishman?" Poirot repeated softly. "He did not give a name." "No. But he wore a ring with a lion crest." Poirot's mind leapt. The crest of the Havershams. Before he could ask further, a faint murmur stirred the shadows, a whisper, hurried footsteps, then silence. When Poirot turned, the priest merely shook his head. "There are ears even in stone, Sahib. Some truths prefer the dark." The whispers of the street. After leaving the temple, Poirot and Priya stopped at a small tea-house shaded by banyan branches. The air buzzed with flies and gossip. Poirot sipped delicately from a cup, his gaze distant. "You are thoughtful, monsieur," said Priya. "Indeed, mademoiselle. It seems your young Mr. Simon has been more active than he admits. To come here, to inquire of value, that is not the act of a devoted son guarding a family treasure." Priya hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Simon is ambitious. He studied archaeology in Oxford but gambled most of his inheritance away. His father does not know." "Ah." Poirot's moustache twitched. "So there is money, and motive." She looked at him, her voice low. "But he was not evil, monsieur. Only reckless. I warned him not to interfere with sacred things." Poirot studied her intently. "You knew of his plans?" Her eyes flashed. "I suspected. He spoke of selling an artifact to an English collector in Calcutta. I told him it was madness." Poirot nodded slowly. "And when one warns a man blinded by desperation, one becomes part of his secret, whether one wishes or not." Priya looked away, her composure cracking for the first time. "You think I am involved?" "I think," Poirot said gently, "that you are frightened, not of guilt, but of what guilt might bring upon others." A curious encounter. As they left the tea-house, a boy darted from the crowd and tugged at Poirot's sleeve. His eyes were bright with mischief and fear. "Sahib," he whispered, "the bell you seek, it has come home." Poirot crouched slightly, his interest keen. "Home? You mean the temple?" The boy shook his head. "Near it. In the small shrine by the sacred pond. But there is danger, do not go at night." Before Poirot could question further, the boy slipped away into the market's chaos and vanished. Priya looked uneasy. He could be lying. "Perhaps," Poirot said. "But the lies of a child often hide a truth an adult fears to speak." An ominous evening. That evening, back at Haversham Manor, the atmosphere was brittle as glass. Simon avoided everyone's gaze, Lady Eleanor seemed distracted, and Colonel Forbes grew increasingly irritable. During dinner, Poirot's quiet voice broke the tension. "It interests me, Sir Reginald, that your son visited the temple recently." The knife in Simon's hand froze. "Who told you that?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah, so you did, then?" Simon flushed. "I was curious, that's all. It's part of our family history. There's no law against asking questions." "Of course not," Poirot said mildly. "Curiosity is a noble thing when it seeks knowledge, not profit." The table fell silent. Lady Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she set down her glass. "Simon," she said faintly, "please." Poirot observed them with serene calm, but his mind was racing. There was fear in the mother's eyes, defiance in the son's, and shame, deep, unspoken shame, in the father's silence. When the meal ended, Poirot stood and bowed politely. "Merci, Miss Amos. I shall trouble you no further this evening. Tomorrow, perhaps, we shall speak of bells, and of conscience." As he retired to his room, the night wind carried again the sound of distant chimes. But this time, the tone was uneven, as though someone, somewhere, had struck a hidden bell by hand. Poirot listened, his face unreadable. "Ah," he murmured, "the bell speaks again, but to whom does it call?" Chapter 4: A Death at Dawn. The night was unusually still. Even the crickets had fallen silent, and the air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and jasmine. Hercule Poirot, ever a light sleeper, awoke shortly before dawn to a faint, distant sound, a cry that seemed to echo across the gardens. It was brief, yet sharp enough to stir alarm. He rose at once, adjusted his immaculate dressing gown, and stepped out into the veranda. A low mist had settled over the lawns, silvering the shrubs and turning the old stone well at the edge of the property into a shadowed silhouette. Then came a second sound, the hurried scuffle of feet and the frightened voice of a servant calling out, "Sahib! Sahib! Come quickly, something terrible!" Within minutes, the household had gathered outside, their faces ghostly pale in the dim light of dawn. Poirot moved through them calmly but swiftly, his mind already at work. The servant led him to the well. There, sprawled at its base among the tangled roots, lay the lifeless body of Simon Haversham. Sir Reginald dropped to his knees beside his son with a cry of anguish. Lady Eleanor clutched the veranda post, her face drained of colour. Colonel Forbes muttered a shocked oath, while Priya Devi stood motionless, her hands pressed tightly together, eyes wide but dry. Poirot knelt carefully beside the body, his sharp gaze missing nothing. The young man's neck bore the unmistakable mark of impact, not from drowning, but from falling. The stonework near the rim of the well was chipped, suggesting a struggle. Yet something else caught Poirot's attention, the faint, sweet fragrance of jasmine oil upon Simon's collar, subtle but distinct. He looked around. "Sir Reginald," he said quietly, "we must move him inside. But first, do not disturb the ground here. There are footprints, and perhaps, something more. The evidence of the morning." By the time the police from Madurai arrived, the sun had risen high enough to pierce the mist. A small crowd of villagers gathered at the edge of the road, whispering of curses and spirits. Poirot stood beside the well, deep in thought. The inspector, a stout man with a practical air, examined the scene and declared, "It is accident, monsieur. He must have come for air and slipped." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "An accident, you say?" "Perhaps. But why, then, this piece of rope, frayed, freshly broken, lying so near?" He held it up delicately. "And these footprints, one large, one small, leading away from the edge." The inspector frowned. "You think foul play?" "I think," said Poirot softly, "that nature does not arrange her tragedies with such symmetry." He bent lower, noting a faint smear of mud on the stones and, beside it, a single delicate footprint, narrow, light, likely a woman's. "Curious," he murmured. "A lady's foot, here at dawn. But which lady, and why?" Grief and shadows. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was thick with sorrow. So Reginald sat rigid in an armchair, staring at nothing, his face grey and drawn. Lady Eleanor wept silently, her hands trembling as she pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips. Poirot entered quietly, his presence as steady as a metronome. "My deepest condolences, Sir Reginald," he said. "Your loss is great, but your courage must be greater. May I ask, when last did you see your son alive?" Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse. "Last night. He came to my study, agitated. He said he was leaving for Madras, that he needed time to think. I forbade it. We quarrelled." Poirot inclined his head gently. "And Lady Eleanor?" She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "He came to my room around midnight. He looked so pale. He said he'd been foolish, that he had done something terrible but would make it right. I thought he spoke of his debts. I told him I loved him no matter what. That was the last time I saw him." Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, the lingering scent of jasmine that clung faintly to her sleeve. "Madam," he said softly, "forgive me, but did you go outside after that?" Her eyes widened. "Outside?" "No. I heard the dogs barking, but I stayed in bed." Poirot nodded, masking his thoughts behind a courteous smile. "Merci. One must never assume guilt where there is grief." The Colonel and the Secretary. Poirot next found Colonel Forbes in the smoking room, staring grimly at the empty decanter. "Beastly business, Poirot," he said. "Poor lad, too high-spirited, perhaps. Can't say I'm surprised something dreadful's happened. The boy was reckless." "Recklessness, yes," Poirot said. "But this was not suicide, mon colonel. He fell, or was pushed." Forbes blinked. "Pushed? Nonsense. Who would?" He stopped himself, glancing away. "Ah," said Poirot mildly, "you think of someone. You hesitate. You wish to protect." The Colonel shifted uneasily. "It's not my place to cast suspicion. But between you and me, Lady Eleanor's nerves have been strained for weeks. Always fretting about the bell, the curse, the servants whispering. I found her wandering near the garden once, long after midnight." Poirot nodded, absorbing the information without comment. Then he turned his attention to Miss Priya Davy, who stood at the window of the study, gazing out over the lawn. "You are quiet, mademoiselle," he said gently. "Too quiet, perhaps." She turned, startled. "What would you have me say?" "A man is dead." "Yes," Poirot replied. "A man you warned only yesterday not to meddle with sacred things. Perhaps you feared this very outcome." Her voice trembled, though her eyes were defiant. "I feared the curse, not the crime." He did not listen. He laughed at me. Poirot stepped closer. "Then you knew he planned something that night?" She hesitated. Yes. He said he was going to fetch the bell back, that he had found where it was hidden. I begged him to wait until morning. He said he must act before his father discovered the truth." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Before his father discovered, what truth, mademoiselle?" But she only shook her head. "I don't know. He left soon after." Poirot smiled faintly. "You are loyal, Miss Davy. But remember, in the service of truth, silence is sometimes the loudest confession. The weight of honor." That afternoon, Poirot walked alone in the garden, umbrella in hand. his thoughts unfolding with methodical precision. Simon had gone out in the night, perhaps to move or retrieve the stolen bell. He had met someone near the well. There had been a struggle, the broken rope, the chipped stone, the second set of footprints. The scent of jasmine, the mark of a woman's shoe. And beneath it all, the shadow of the bell, the object that seemed to govern every heartbeat of this household. He turned to see Sir Reginald watching him from the veranda. The man's face was pale but resolute. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "this must not become public. My son's death, it must be declared an accident. The honor of my family cannot bear scandal." Poirot's eyes softened, yet there was steel beneath his tone. "Honor, Sir Reginald, is a fine thing. But truth endures where honor perishes. I shall not speak to the world, but neither shall I close my eyes." Sir Reginald's gaze faltered, and for an instant Poirot saw something, guilt, perhaps, or dread, flicker behind his eyes. As dusk fell, the bells of Meenakshi Temple began their evening chorus, long and mournful. Poirot stood by the window, listening. "The bell tolls again," he murmured. "Once for the stolen, once for the dead. And perhaps soon, once more, for the guilty." Chapter 5: The Psychology of Secrets. The day following Simon Haversham's death dawned pale and restless. A humid wind swept through the courtyards of the estate, stirring the curtains and scattering petals from the marigold garlands that had been hastily hung in mourning. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, the silence of tragedy, yes, but also the silence of those who feared what might follow. Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever in a cream linen suit, sat on the veranda beneath a whirring ceiling fan. Before him rested a cup of delicate Darjeeling tea, untouched and rapidly cooling. He was not, as Lady Eleanor supposed, lost in grief or prayer. He was thinking. He was always thinking. Human nature, Hastings once said, he murmured to himself, is the same in London or Madurai. Only the weather differs. He smiled faintly. But the motives, those are as varied as the spices in the market. He had already dismissed the idea of suicide. Simon Haversham had been young, strong, and brimming with a restless vitality. Men such as he did not quietly end their lives beside a well. No, he had met someone that night. Someone he trusted. Someone who betrayed him. Poirot rose, adjusted his cuffs, and began his rounds. The widow's guilt. Lady Eleanor received him in the drawing-room, her delicate frame draped in mourning silk. Her eyes were red from sleeplessness, yet she still managed a smile of brittle courtesy. "Mr. Poirot, I cannot bear to think of what you must have seen yesterday. My son, my dear boy," she broke off, pressing her handkerchief to her lips. Poirot bowed slightly. "You are brave, madam. But there is one thing more cruel than sorrow, and that is doubt. Permit me to remove it from your heart, yes." She nodded faintly. "If you can." "I must ask you, Lady Eleanor," Poirot said gently, "this scent you wear, it is jasmine, is it not?" Her hand froze midway to her teacup. "Yes. It is my favorite." "Why do you ask?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Because I found the same fragrance upon your son's collar when I examined him. Naturally, one might suppose you embraced him in farewell." She looked startled. Yes, of course I did. When he came to say good night." "Is that so strange?" "Not strange at all," Poirot said softly. "And yet, you said yesterday that you did not leave your room afterward." Her fingers trembled. "No, I did not." Poirot inclined his head. "Then perhaps I am mistaken. I am often mistaken before I am right. It is the burden of precision." He rose, and as he left, he noted her reflection in the mirror, her shoulders heaving, her hand pressed to her mouth. "Grief, yes. But was it only grief? 2. The Colonel's anger. Next, Poirot found Colonel Forbes pacing the garden, his pipe clamped between his teeth. He looked every inch the man of action thwarted by inaction. "Poirot," he barked, "I hear the police are calling it an accident." "Damned nonsense. You think otherwise, don't you?" "I think," said Poirot mildly, "that truth does not depend upon what one calls it." The Colonel grunted. "Well, I tell you this, the boy was a fool. Gambling debts, unpaid bills, and a head full of nonsense about cursed relics. Still, he didn't deserve this end." Poirot studied him closely. "You were fond of him, perhaps?" "Fond? I was fond of his father. I've served under Reginald in the past. But I didn't like the way Simon treated people, especially that poor girl, Miss Davy." "Ah," said Poirot. "Miss Davy. You imply he wronged her." The Colonel hesitated, then shrugged. "There was talk. He flirted, promised her something, money, perhaps, and then cast her aside. She was furious. I caught her in tears not a week ago." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And yet she remains loyal, protective even. Curious, is it not?" Forbes snorted. "Women are like that. They'll defend the man who ruins them." Poirot smiled faintly. Mon Colonel. Not always. Sometimes they defend the secret that ruins them both." 3. The Secretary's burden. Miss Priya Davy was in the library, sorting through papers when Poirot entered. She looked weary, her eyes hollow with sleeplessness. "Miss Davy," Poirot began kindly, "I intrude once more, but I promise brevity. Tell me, did Mr. Haversham ever confide in you regarding the bell?" Her hands paused over a stack of ledgers. "He told me he wanted to return it to the temple. That he regretted what he had done." "And did he tell you who helped him take it?" Her breath caught. "No. But I think he was not alone." "Indeed?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "And why do you think that?" "Because," she whispered, "he could not have lifted the bell himself. It is made of bronze, heavy, ancient. Someone must have helped him carry it from the temple that night." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Excellent, mademoiselle. You observe what others overlook. And yet, when I ask who that someone might be, you hesitate. Why?" She looked down. "Because I fear it was Sir Reginald." Poirot remained silent. She continued, her voice trembling. "Sir Reginald often spoke of honor, of preserving the family name. He wanted the bell as a symbol of prestige, a relic to display when the estate was restored. Simon did it for him, I think. But when the theft was discovered, Sir Reginald became terrified. He ordered the bell hidden, told his son to destroy the records. Simon wanted to make amends, to return it, and perhaps his father forbade it." Poirot's gaze softened. "You are brave to speak, mademoiselle. But one thing puzzles me. Why remain here? Why not leave this house of secrets?" She looked at him, her eyes dark and unreadable. "Because the truth deserves a witness." 4. Poirot reflects. Later, Poirot sat once again on the veranda, gazing across the lawns. The air shimmered with heat, distant temple bells carried faintly through the air. Each clue, each word, fell into his mind like pieces of an intricate mosaic. He murmured to himself, "The mother weeps with guilt. The father fears scandal. The colonel hides anger. The secretary conceals loyalty. Each holds a fragment of the truth, but who holds the weapon?" He took out his little notebook, its pages filled with neat, ordered writing. Clues. Rope near well, cut, not frayed. Jasmine scent on victim. Small footprint, feminine. Bell missing from hiding place. Simon spoke of a confession. He underlined the last note. A confession. But to whom? As he mused, a shadow fell across the veranda. Sir Reginald stood there, pale and gaunt. "Mr. Poirot," he said gravely, "I wish to speak privately." Poirot gestured for him to sit. "There will be an inquest," Reginald continued, "but I have decided to declare it an accident. It is best for everyone." Poirot regarded him coolly. "For everyone, Sir Reginald? Or for you?" The older man stiffened. "You overstep yourself." "Perhaps," Poirot said softly. "But I serve the truth, not convenience. Your son was not alone that night." He went to return the bell. Someone followed him, someone who feared what that act of repentance would reveal. Reginald's hands clenched. "You have no proof." Poirot rose slowly. "None, monsieur." "Not yet. But soon I shall have not only proof, I shall have the heart of the motive. And that, I fear, is the most damning evidence of all. Vide nightfall and resolve." That evening, Poirot wrote a letter, not to the police, but to himself. A habit he often indulged when clarity seemed near. There is no curse. There is only conscience. The bell's toll is human guilt made audible. The question remains, who feared its return? He sealed the note, tucked it into his pocket, and stood by the open window. The moon hung low over the palm trees, and somewhere beyond the hills, a temple bell rang once, pure, mournful, eternal. Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, my friend," he whispered, "you ring for justice, do you not? Then let us see who answers." Chapter 6, The Bell and the Blood. The sun had barely risen when Hercule Poirot set out across the dew-soaked lawns, his walking cane tapping softly against the flagstones. The air was heavy, the sky streaked with amber and grey. It was, he thought, the kind of morning that invited truth to reveal itself, quietly, reluctantly, like a confession whispered to a priest. He was joined by Colonel Forbes, who trudged beside him in silence. "Poirot," he grumbled, "I don't see the point of this little expedition. The police have already searched the grounds twice." "Ah, mon colonel," Poirot replied lightly, "they searched for evidence. I search for logic. It hides better than footprints, but it always leaves a trail." They reached the old storehouse behind the gardens, a long, low building of crumbling brick. It had once stored tea chests and supplies for the estate's workers. Now it stood abandoned, its door fastened with a rusted padlock. Poirot examined the lock. "You see, this is new," he said. "And yet the hinges, very old, very weak. Someone has secured the obvious, but neglected the subtle." With surprising agility, he wedged his cane beneath the hinge and gave a small push. The door creaked open with a reluctant sigh. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and oil. Shafts of light pierced the gloom, illuminating stacks of crates and old tools. Poirot stepped carefully, his gaze sweeping the shadows. Then he saw it, a bronze bell, half shrouded beneath a tarpaulin. It was dull with age, but unmistakably sacred, its surface engraved with Tamil inscriptions and lotus motifs. A faint dark stain marred the rim, not dust, not rust, but something darker. "Good Lord," breathed Forbes. "That's it, isn't it? The missing temple bell." Poirot approached slowly, his expression grave. "Oh, mon ami. And do you see? The stain, blood, perhaps. Fresh, not ancient." Forbes stiffened. "You think?" Poirot nodded. "Simon Haversham came here that night. He meant to return the bell. But someone was waiting for him. I, the symbol and the sin." Poirot crouched beside the bell, his fingertips tracing the pattern. "You know, Colonel," He murmured, in many cultures, bells are symbols of truth. They call the soul to honesty, to confession. Perhaps our young friend felt that call too strongly. Forbes frowned. You believe he came to atone? I am sure of it, Poirot said softly. He wished to right a wrong. But for another, that same act meant exposure and ruin. He lifted a corner of the tarpaulin and found a small bundle of papers hidden beneath. Letters, bound with a faded red ribbon. Poirot opened the top one carefully. They were ledgers, recording transactions, dates, amounts, and signatures. The handwriting varied, but one name appeared repeatedly, I. Haversham. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah. The motive begins to breathe. Forbes leaned closer. Good heavens. He was selling artifacts, wasn't he? Antiquities, smuggled out through the ports. Poirot nodded. Just so. A secret trade, concealed beneath the veil of philanthropy. Simon discovered it, perhaps even helped, until conscience awoke. He planned to return the bell, but his father could not allow that truth to emerge. Forbes' face darkened. Are you saying Sir Reginald? Poirot raised a hand. I say nothing yet. I observe. But come, there is one thing more. He pointed to the ground near the bell. The dust there was disturbed, two distinct sets of footprints, one large, one small. Near them lay a thin strip of torn fabric, silk, faintly perfumed with jasmine. Poirot picked it up, sniffed it gently, and smiled his little smile of triumph. Ah, voila! The circle closes. 2. The conversation with Lady Eleanor. Later that morning, Lady Eleanor sat in her boudoir, pale and fragile beneath her mourning veil. When Poirot entered, she looked up at him with eyes that had lost all strength to dissemble. I know, she whispered. You found it, haven't you? Poirot inclined his head. Yes, madam. The bell, and the proof of what it has cost. Her lips trembled. Then it is over. Not quite, he said gently. There remains the matter of who shed your son's blood. She shuddered. Don't, please don't. Madam, Poirot said softly, when I entered your son's chamber that morning, I smelled jasmine on his collar. Today, I found a fragment of silk with the same perfume, near the bell. I do not believe it was yours. She looked up sharply. Then whose? Patience, Poirot interrupted. I think, Lady Eleanor, you know already. It was another woman sent, one close to your family, one who loved your son in silence. Her eyes widened in shock. Miss Davy. Just so, Poirot said. But the scent, it tells a deeper story. For jasmine oil, you see, is not only perfume. It is also used in temples to anoint the bronze idols and bells before worship. A pious woman might wear it as devotion, not vanity. Lady Eleanor clasped her hands tightly. You think she killed him? Poirot's gaze softened. None. She loved him, perhaps too deeply. But she is not the one who struck the fatal blow. Then who? She whispered. Poirot looked toward the window, where Sir Reginald's silhouette passed in the garden below. I believe the truth, madam, is both nearer and more terrible than you imagine. 3. Sir Reginald confronted. Poirot found Sir Reginald in his study, staring into an empty glass. His posture was that of a man whose soul had aged a decade overnight. You come to accuse me, he said flatly. I come to listen, Poirot replied. You are a man of honor, Sir Reginald. But honor built on deceit cannot stand. Reginald gave a weary laugh. You found the ledgers, then? Yes. Your son found them first. The older man's face twisted in pain. He confronted me, called me a thief, a desecrator. Said he would return the bell himself. I tried to reason with him. He wouldn't listen. And so you followed him, Poirot said quietly. Reginald's shoulders sagged. Yes. To the storehouse. He was already lifting the tarpaulin when I arrived. We argued. He said he'd tell the authorities, that he'd rather see our name disgraced than live with a lie. I lost my temper. I grabbed his arm. He slipped, fell, the stone. His voice broke. Poirot watched him with sad eyes. You did not mean to kill him. No, whispered Reginald. But when I saw the blood, when I realized, I panicked. I thought only of concealment. I dragged him to the well. God forgive me. Poirot's voice was very gentle. You thought the water would wash away the sin. But alas, mon ami, blood speaks even through the silence. Reginald covered his face with his hands. You cannot let this become public. Eleanor, she would not survive the disgrace. Poirot looked away. The law, Sir Reginald, may show mercy when confession precedes discovery. I advise you to give your statement before others arrive. He turned toward the door, then paused. There is still one more innocent soul who deserves peace, Miss Davy. She kept your secret out of fear and loyalty. Do not let her suffer in silence. For the bell's return. That evening, as the sky burned crimson over Madurai, Poirot stood on the steps of the Meenakshi temple. The priests had gathered, chanting softly as the bronze bell, the true bell of the shrine, was carried forward by temple attendants. Behind them walked Sir Reginald, pale but resolute, escorted by the police. Lady Eleanor stood beside Poirot, weeping silently. Miss Priya Davy trailed behind, her hands clasped in prayer. As the bell was hoisted back into its place, the priest struck it gently. The note that rang out was pure and mournful, not the sound of guilt, but of release. Poirot removed his hat and bowed his head. The bell tolls for truth, he murmured. And truth, like the sound of bronze, endures long after the hand that struck it has fallen silent. Chapter 7, The Web of Confessions. The heavy air of the Madurai afternoon pressed down upon Haversham Manor like a hand upon a fevered brow. Outside, the monsoon clouds had begun to gather, their slow procession mirrored by the tension inside the house. Within the great hall, Hercule Poirot stood at the center of a tableau of silence. Around him sat the mourners and suspects, Lady Eleanor pale and trembling, Colonel Forbes grim as granite, Miss Priya Davy with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and Sir Reginald, haggard, his eyes hollow from a sleepless night. Poirot's small, gleaming eyes swept across them all. My friends, he began softly, this house has been filled with shadows, shadows of grief, of fear, of deceit. But shadows, you see, exist only because there is light. And now, it is time for the light to fall upon the truth. No one spoke. A single clock ticked at the far end of the hall, steady and relentless. Poirot straightened a small vase of orchids on the table, a habit that always preceded his most delicate operations. I have spent many years observing the human heart, he continued. It fascinates me, its logic, its contradictions. The murder of Simon Havisham is no tale of greed or revenge. It is a story of love, twisted by pride, warped by fear, and finally destroyed by guilt. Lady Eleanor gasped softly. Murder? You mean? Poirot inclined his head. Yes, madam. Murder. Not planned, perhaps, but no less real for that. Sir Reginald has confessed that he struggled with his son near the storehouse. That struggle ended in death. Sir Reginald flinched but said nothing. His wife turned to him, stricken. Reginald, it's true. He lowered his head. It was an accident, Eleanor. God knows I never meant. Poirot lifted a hand. Ah, yes, the eternal plea of accident. But before we absolve, let us understand. There is more to this tragedy than one act of rage. I the bell a symbol. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes making no sound on the tiled floor. Let us return, for a moment, to the beginning, the stolen temple bell. A relic of devotion, taken not for greed alone but for vanity. Sir Reginald sought to restore the glory of his failing estate, and in doing so, he defied both law and faith. Sir Reginald groaned softly. I thought it harmless, a forgotten thing. Harmless? Poirot repeated gently. Nothing taken in deceit is harmless, mon ami. The bell became the very heart of your family's misfortune. For it was not only a relic of the gods, it was a mirror. It reflected each of you as you truly are. He turned to Lady Eleanor. You, madam, sought to protect your husband's reputation, even at the cost of truth. When you found Simon gone that night, you followed him. You saw what had happened, and you helped to conceal it. Her eyes widened in horror. How could you possibly? The scent of jasmine, Poirot said softly. It lingered not only on your son's collar, but upon the rope near the well. You were there, madam. You helped your husband move the body, believing you were protecting him. A low moan escaped her lips. Yes, she whispered. He begged me, said it was an accident. I thought if I helped, we could bury it, bury everything. But I see now, it was already buried within us. Poirot inclined his head solemnly. You are not the only one, madam. You acted out of love, misguided, but human. 2. The secretary's secret. He turned next to Miss Priya Davy, who sat very still, her face calm but pale. Mademoiselle, Poirot said softly, you, too, were part of this web. You knew of the theft. You knew that the bell was hidden on the estate. Yet you said nothing. Why? Her eyes met his steadily. Because I owed my life to Lady Eleanor. She took me in when I had nothing. I could not expose her family. Poirot nodded approvingly. A noble sentiment. But there was more, was there not? There was affection for Simon. Her composure cracked. Yes, she whispered. He was kind to me. Foolish, careless, but kind. He promised he would put things right, return the bell, confess to the police. I begged him to wait, to let me speak to Sir Reginald first. But he was determined. When I saw him leave that night, I prayed for him. I never imagined. Her voice broke, and tears glistened on her lashes. Poirot's tone softened. You did not kill him, mademoiselle. But your silence chained you to this crime as surely as any accomplice. The burden of a secret can kill the soul, even when the body remains innocent. 3. The Colonel's anger. Colonel Forbes shifted uneasily in his chair. You've absolved the lady, condemned the husband, pitied the girl. Where does that leave me, Poirot? You don't think I? Poirot smiled slightly. Non, mon colonel. You did not strike the blow. But you too are part of the tragedy. You saw more than you have admitted. The colonel frowned. I told you all I know. Did you? Poirot asked. You were outside that night, were you not? The dogs barked, you looked from your window and saw movement near the well. You went to investigate but turned back when you recognized Sir Reginald. Forbes hesitated, then sighed heavily. Yes. I saw him dragging something. I didn't know what to think. I thought perhaps he was moving a heavy box, or he stopped. But I didn't want to know. He was my friend. I chose to look away. Poirot spread his hands gently. And thus, the circle closes. Each of you, in your way, acted from loyalty, unloyalty, when blind, becomes the most dangerous of virtues. For Poirot's philosophy. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then Poirot spoke again, softly, almost sadly. You see, my friends, murder is rarely born of hatred. More often, it comes from fear, fear of loss, fear of shame, fear of truth. Sir Reginald feared the disgrace that would follow exposure. Lady Eleanor feared for her husband's honour. Miss Davy feared for her benefactress. And you, Colonel, feared the breaking of friendship. Each chose silence. Each became, in some measure, guilty. He turned toward the window, where the first drops of rain began to fall. The gods, they say, punished the theft with a curse. But I tell you, the only curse here was human conscience. It needs no temple to ring its bell. No one spoke. The sound of rain intensified, drumming softly upon the roof. Poirot's voice, calm but firm, broke the quiet once more. Sir Reginald, you must go to the authorities. The law may show mercy, but it cannot forgive what remains unspoken. Confession, monsieur, is not defeat. It is the beginning of peace. Reginald's shoulders slumped. You are right. I have lived my life by appearances, not truth. I shall go. Lady Eleanor reached for his hand, tears running freely down her cheeks. We will go together, she whispered. Poirot bowed his head respectfully. Then perhaps, madam, you shall find in repentance what you could not find in concealment, serenity. The calm before the revelation. When the others had left the hall, Poirot remained alone, staring at the rain-soaked gardens beyond the windows. His reflection in the glass looked older, wearier. From the corridor came soft footsteps. Miss Davy appeared, hesitant. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly, you have spoken truth, but not all of it. There is something more, is there not? Poirot's lips curved in that enigmatic smile that so often preceded revelation. Ah, mademoiselle. You have the intuition of the East. Yes, there is more. There is one final twist, one last bell yet to toll. What do you mean? He turned, eyes bright with purpose. The death of Simon Haversham, it was not as simple as it seems. There was another hand that night, unseen, unsuspected. And tomorrow, when we all gather once more, that hand shall be revealed. Miss Davy's eyes widened. Another hand? But who? Poirot raised a finger to his lips. Patience, mademoiselle. The truth, like the monsoon, must break in its own time. And when it does, then the flood comes. He looked once more toward the darkening horizon, where lightning flickered faintly. The storm approaches, he murmured. And with it, justice. Chapter 8, The Final Toll. The monsoon had broken over Madurai. Rain poured in sheets upon the ancient city, washing the temple stones and beating against the high windows of Haversham Manor. The thunder rolled like the voice of judgment. Inside the grand hall, a small fire burned. Around it sat the company, solemn, subdued, expectant. Lady Eleanor in black silk, her face drawn but calm. Sir Reginald pale, resigned. Colonel Forbes grim and silent. Miss Priya Davy with her hands clasped tightly, her eyes full of apprehension. And then, there was Hercule Poirot. He stood near the hearth, immaculate despite the humidity, his moustache undisturbed, his gaze keen. On the table before him lay the battered temple bell, cleaned and polished, its dull bronze now gleaming faintly in the firelight. Poirot rested his fingertips lightly on its surface. My friends, he began, his voice low but clear, we meet for the final time, to speak not of suspicion, but of truth. For the truth, once found, must always be told. Sir Reginald stirred uneasily. I have confessed my part, Monsieur Poirot. I shall tell the authorities. Must there be more? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, yes, monsieur. There must always be more, until the story is whole. For what you confessed was an act of folly, not of murder. A ripple of shock went through the room. What do you mean? Lady Eleanor whispered. Poirot's tone softened. You struggled with your son, yes, but your hands did not end his life. The truth, I fear, is both more tragic and more cunning than that. I.e. the scene revisited. Poirot walked to the window, where rain streaked the glass. Let us return once more to that night, he said. Simon left the manor carrying a lantern. He went to the storehouse, intending to retrieve the temple bell and restore it to its rightful place. He was seen by Miss Davy, who followed him partway. So Reginald, suspecting what his son planned, followed too. They argued near the well. There was a scuffle. So Reginald struck his son, but not fatally. Reginald raised his head sharply. Not fatally? But he fell? Ah. Poirot held up a finger. He fell, yes. He was stunned, disoriented. You believed him dead, and in panic you fled, leaving the scene unseen by anyone. Poirot paused, his eyes sweeping the room. But when Simon awoke minutes later, he was not alone. The words fell like a spark in dry tinder. Someone else had come upon the scene, Poirot continued. Someone who knew the truth of the theft, who feared that Simon's confession would destroy everything. And that person finished what you had begun. Lady Eleanor gasped. No, surely you cannot mean. Poirot turned his gaze toward her, not accusing, but compassionate. None, madam. It was not you. He turned slowly toward another. It was you, Miss Davy. A stunned silence. Then Miss Davy rose to her feet, her face white as the lightning outside. That's a lie, she cried. I loved him. Poirot inclined his head. Yes, mademoiselle, you did. But love, when twisted by fear, can destroy more surely than hate. 2. The evidence. Poirot stepped closer to the table. Permit me to explain. When I examined Simon's body, I noted something curious, a thin, dark mark upon his throat, quite separate from the bruise upon his temple. Not from a rope, but from a cord, a silk scarf, perhaps. The blow stunned him, the scarf strangled him. He turned toward Miss Davy. You wore such a scarf, did you not? Yellow silk, the same I found torn upon a branch near the well. Her lips trembled. I dropped it earlier. Ah, no, Poirot said softly. It was torn in struggle. And there is more. The lantern found beside Simon bore your fingerprints, and only yours. You tried to light it again after his fall, perhaps hoping he would awaken. But when he stirred, when he said he would tell the police, you panicked. The room was utterly still, save for the relentless drumming of rain. Miss Davy sank into her chair, face hidden in her hands. I didn't mean to kill him, she whispered. I thought he would ruin them all. Lady Eleanor, Sir Reginald, everything they gave me. I tried to stop him. He struck out, and she broke off, sobbing. He was so still afterward. I thought he was dead before. I thought, oh, God forgive me. Poirot's voice, though stern, was not cruel. You acted from loyalty, the same loyalty that blinded them all. But loyalty to a lie, mademoiselle, is no virtue. 3. The bell tolls once more. He turned again to the bell on the table. And now we come to this, the heart of our mystery. The temple bell, stolen from its home, silent for years, now tolls again. Do you know, my friends, what I discovered this morning? He tapped the bell gently. The The note rang pure and haunting through the hall. Inside the bell was hidden a small compartment, and within it, an inscription. It reads, "He who takes what is sacred shall lose what he loves most." Perhaps a superstition, yes. But how strange, the prophecy fulfilled. For each of you lost something precious, a son, a friend, a soul's peace. He looked from one to another. The curse was not divine. It was human. The crime of theft bred deceit, and deceit bred death. The thunder rolled again, as if to underline his words. 4. The aftermath. Poirot turned to Inspector Ramesh, who had entered quietly during the confession. "Monsieur l'Inspector, the matter is now in your hands. Miss Davy has spoken. I ask only that you treat her with compassion. She is not evil, merely a woman who loved unwisely and feared too greatly." Ramesh nodded solemnly. "We will see justice done." As Miss Davy was led away, she turned once toward Lady Eleanor, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant harm," she whispered. "Forgive me." Lady Eleanor bowed her head, unable to speak. Sir Reginald reached for her hand, and for the first time in many months, she did not pull away. Poirot watched them quietly. The fire crackled, casting warm light upon faces lined with grief yet softened with understanding. Via Poirot's reflection. Later that evening, Poirot sat upon the veranda, gazing out into the rain-soaked gardens. The storm had begun to ease, and in the distance, the temple bell rang faintly, carried on the wind from the city below. Dr. Patel approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You have done it again, Monsieur Poirot," he said gently. "But it is a sad victory." Poirot accepted the cup with a faint smile. "Oh mon ami. There are victories that taste of ashes. To solve a mystery is satisfying, but to understand a tragedy, that is another matter." Patel nodded. "Do you believe in the curse?" Poirot's eyes twinkled faintly. Not in curses. Only in consequences. Every wrong act rings out like a bell, and sooner or later, the echo returns. He glanced at the distant temple lights. Perhaps, when the bell was stolen, the gods did not punish. They merely waited. And when the bell was found, it was humanity that delivered its own justice. He sipped his tea thoughtfully, then added, "You see, my friend, the universe is not cruel, only precise. Like mathematics. Like the little grey cells." 6. The closing note. By morning, the storm had passed. The air was cool, washed clean. Poirot stood at the gates of Haversham Manor, his valise in hand. Sir Reginald and Lady Eleanor came to see him off. "You have restored more than justice, Monsieur Poirot," Lady Eleanor said quietly. "You have restored our souls." Poirot bowed slightly. "Ah, madam, that is more than I deserve. I merely followed the truth, it is the truth that restores." Reginald's voice was hoarse. "Will we ever find peace, do you think?" Poirot smiled gently. "Peace, monsieur, comes not from forgetting, but from understanding. Remember your son, not for how he died, but for what his death taught you." He tipped his hat. "And now, I must go. There is a train to Madras, and beyond that, who knows what puzzle awaits Hercule Poirot." As he walked down the rain-slicked road, the sun broke through the clouds. Far away, from the direction of the temple, the bell rang again, clear, resonant, forgiving. Poirot paused, listening. Then, with a small, satisfied nod, he murmured, "The gods, they too approve when justice and mercy walk hand in hand." And so he departed, the little man with the perfect moustache, leaving behind a house cleansed by truth, a family humbled by love, and a bell that would forever echo the mystery of the human heart.